Hey everyone. First of all, I would like to say a huge thank you to all of you who have been following my little Nix series here on YouTube. The response has been incredible, and your comments and feedback have been very valuable and encouraging to me, so thank you very much. While working on the series and reading comments and emails, I have noticed that some viewers could benefit from a stronger foundation in the basics, especially when it comes to Git and the role of Git in Nix Flakes. In part, these are things that should have been included into the first video in the first place. So see this video as a little prequel or as episode 0 of our NixOS Flakes series here. So today we will have a look into some Git commands. This will not be a full Git tutorial. There are other videos which explain Git much better than I can. But I will show you some practical examples how we can use Git in our next Flake here. And I hope after the video you have a better understanding how to work with your Flake configuration and how to really make use of Git to have things easier for you in your workflow. What I also would like to address later in the video is the usage of different Nix packages version in the Flake I have been showing here on YouTube. And I will also share some of the learning resources that I have used to get started with Nix and to learn about flakes and so on and so forth. So without further ado, let's dive into it. So first of all, we have the code repo that I have linked in all of my descriptions. And you can see here in the code repo, there are different branches and there's a branch for each video. In order to get this on your computer, you just need to have Git installed and you need to clone this repo here. So you can just copy this Git link over here and then you just go for Git clone and the repo URL and then you can just cd into the directory. And what I would recommend to you in order to be able to switch between the different videos and to have all code available is to use a fetch all on the repo to download all of the different branches so we can easily switch back and forth. So when we have opened the repo in our editor here, we can just go to the terminal and we can very easily switch between branches. So for example, when I enter git checkout video 16, this will switch to the branch for video 16. And you could also see that my editor just reflects the changes and it added a lot of new files here. And now I can have a look at the code base at this time here. And of course, I can just switch back to video number 1. So we are on the original branch here. And now I want to show you some Git commands and how to use Git really with the Nix Flake in order to have a good experience with it. Actually, Git is very important for Nix Flakes because Nix will ignore any files in this directory that are not part of the Git repo. So when you, for example, add a new file or when you rename a folder, which is basically treated as adding a new file, and you don't add these files or folders to the Git repo, then you will get error messages and you will not be able to evaluate your flake successfully. As I said before, this will not be a complete Git tutorial, and I can just encourage you to learn about Git because this makes your life so much easier when you work with any kind of code on your computer. So first of all, I don't know, let's say we make some small changes here. We rename our VM here and maybe we go to our configuration.nix and we also rename the host name here. And when I head back to my terminal, I enter git status, I can see that I have 2 modified files here. And what I can also do is I can display the differences between the changes that I have just made and the last changes that have been committed to the Git repo. So you can see here we have the change in Flake.nix on line 42, and we have the change in configuration.nix on line 15 here. And what I can do with these changes now is I can commit them and make them permanent, or I can just revert them. So for example, when I enter git restore and flake.nix, this will restore my changes to flake.nix. And when I execute git diff again, you can see the only change we have here will be in configuration.nix. And what you also can do is you can just do a git restore and then a dot, and this will restore all of the changes that have been made until the last commit here. And when we have a look here in the file, you can see that this is also reflected in the editor and also in configuration.nix. And I will just quickly make changes again here. So when we have a look at git status again, you can see here Git is telling us changes not staged for commit. And when you are done with doing modifications to our file and we are sure about it and we want to commit these changes, we need to stage them first. And actually Git is telling us what to do here. So no changes added to commit, use git add and or git commit -a. And what we can do now is, and that I have done kind of on autopilot on most of my videos, I always use git add and a dot. And this will stage all changed files, and it will also add all files that are not tracked by Git yet. And this will basically done in the current folder and will also include all subfolders. Another way to do this is just entering git add and then -A. And when I have a look at git status again, you can see here changes to be committed. So the changes are staged now and they are ready to be committed here. And to commit the changes, we need to enter git commit and then -m for message. And then we just put our commit message. And on the commit message, I would recommend to put something meaningful really. So especially when you work on code with a team, it's very important to have meaningful commit messages that kind of communicate what has been done. So now you can see we have a new commit on branch video 1 here. And when I have a look at git log, you can see here, there's my latest commit here. There's also a way to have a shorthanded output. So you just enter git log 1 line, and you can even make an alias with the short output and some nice formatting. So for example, I have made a shortcut for git log d, and this will look like this. And here you have the different commits to your repo here. And when we make another change here now, let's say we just rename our host name here to something else. And of course, we need to change that in our flake.nix also. And we have a look at git status. You can see here that Git is not really considering this as just a rename. Git tells us we have unstaged changes here. We have the modification in flake.nix, and for the Git repo, it's just as we had removed the files and folders with renaming that folder. And here it says it has an untracked folder. And when it comes to renaming files and folders, this has also be staged and committed in order to have Nix evaluate your Flake correctly. What you can also do is to use git commit and then -am, and this will take the staging and the commit into one command, so you have to execute only one command. And now when we have a look at git status here, you can see that our changes have been committed, but the git commit -am command did not add the untracked files to our repo here. And when we have a look at the log, we see our different commits. And the problem right now is we have kind of a broken commit really, because the code base we have just committed is not going to work because the new folder here and with all the subfiles have not been added to the repo, and they are basically not tracked right now. And in order to undo this commit here, I can just enter git reset dash dash soft and then head and then tilde1. And this will basically reset the state of the repo back one commit. And when I have a look at my Git log here, you can see that the last commit has been removed. And one thing to note here is on the git reset, there's a soft and a hard, and the soft method will keep the changes and the hard method will discard the changes here. So now, just in case of the rename and in order to have all files tracked and added, I would recommend to use this separately again. So I would use git add and then a dot. And when I now have a look at my status here, then you can see after adding the files to the Git repo, Git is now considering this change as a rename here. And now we can just commit our changes and have a look at our Git log here. And now we have our new commit up here. And now I will just make some more code changes here. Maybe rename our host in our configuration.nix. And now I will just commit the changes with git commit am and another message here. And when I have a look at my different commits here, I can also switch between them back and forth. So what I can do here now is I can do a git checkout and then give it my commit hash. And now you can see I am on this commit here, and this should also be reflected in the changes here. And to get back to where I was, I would just do a git checkout and then video 1, because that was the branch we have been working on. And another very useful thing here is, let's say I have an open change here. And then I want to, for some reason, check out an old commit here. Then you can see you will get a warning. Your local changes to the following files would be overwritten by checkout. And Git also tells us what to do, really. So Git recommends to commit our changes, which I don't want to do in this case because my editing of this file is not finished yet, or I can just stash them. So what I can do here is I can just enter git stash. And now my changes have been saved. And when I enter git stash list here, I can see these are the changes I have made and I have just stashed away now. And now I can just switch to this commit here and everything is working. And I can review the code here. And when I head back to video number 1, then I can just enter git stash pop. And this will actually take my changes out of the stash, remove it from the stash list and apply it to my code here. So I am back at the exact same point before where I checked out the previous commit here. When it comes to switching between commits and reviewing code for an old commit, you might have a use case where you want to make changes to an older commit, and this can cause some problems. So the way I would recommend you to handle a scenario like this is to actually create a new branch. And the way you can do this is with git checkout -b, and then you give your branch name and then you give it the commit you want to base your branch on. When I do like this, you can see the new branch has been created and it also switched to the new branch. And when I head back to video 1 and have a look here, you can see down here that the branch has been created at this point. As you can already see, commit is really like a snapshot or a photograph of your Git repo, where you can kind of freeze the state of your code in time. So these were some basic Git commands you can use in a Nix Flake. And there's really a lot to master Git. I am also not an expert on Git, but learning Git is very well worth the time, really. Now let's have a look into Nix Flake commands here. There are just a couple of them, but they are quite important when it comes to Nix Flakes. The first one I would like to show you is Nix Flake init. And this will basically just create an empty flake. So when I have a look here, this has just created a very simple flake.nix file And of course, in order to use this flake and to work on this flake and maybe to check the flake for errors, I would still need to initialize a Git repo. So this would be like simple git init. Other useful commands are, for example, Nix Flake update. This will update all of the inputs to the flake. So if you've specified one or more Nix packages, this will go to GitHub and get the latest version of the Nix packages you have specified. And this will also go for other inputs. So for example, you could have your dot files as an input, and this will also have a look at the repo for your dot files and get the latest version here. What you also can do is you can just update one of your inputs. So I can just enter Nix Flake update and then, for example, just home manager. And this will only update home manager in my Flake here. And there's also a command where what you can also use is Nix Flake show, and this will show you the structure of your Flake. So you can see here we have a home configuration. We have one NixOS configuration, which is in this case M3 Helios, and we have 3 overlays defined. And this will just give you an overview of the structure of your Flake. One command I regularly use before I start rebuilding a configuration is I would just enter Nix Flake check here. And this will start evaluating your Flake and check for errors in your Nix code. So let's say if you had renamed a folder and did not commit the changes here, this would complain and tell you that the file is not known. And this will also throw any error that the NixOS rebuild command would also throw when rebuilding your system. So that's a good way to check if everything is done correctly in your Flake here. One common scenario, especially when you work with Nix packages unstable, it is possible that you, for example, do a Nix Flake update and you update all of your inputs, and then you make some other changes and you commit those changes. And then when you try to rebuild your system, you have a broken package or broken package dependency, and there's really no way to build a system. What you can do in a case like this is to just get the last version that was still working on your log file here. So in order to simulate this, I will just commit my changes here because we have just run a Nix Flake update and my log file has changed. And now when we head back to our Git log here, and let's suppose this was the last time where my Flake was evaluating correctly and my system could actually be built. Then I could just enter git checkout and give it my hash from the last version, and then enter -- and give it my flake.log file. And now my code is still the same, but my log file has been fetched from the previous commit. So now I have a working log file again. And now I can just commit these changes with the new log file here. And then I can start building my system again. What I also would like to talk about is the NixOS rebuild command. And the minimum version of this command is actually NixOS rebuild, and then the action it should take, that's most of the time switch. And then we give it a -- flake, and then we give it the name of our system configuration. And there are different things you can do with NixOS rebuild switch. So first of all, you don't have to do a switch. You can also do a NixOS rebuild boot. And this will actually build the configuration and create the boot entry in systemd or in grub. And next time you restart your computer, this will be the default configuration. Sometimes you can run into a scenario where NixOS rebuild switch does not really work and NixOS is not able to switch to the new configuration. And that happens sometimes when you do really large changes on your system. And In this case, the solution is to do a NixOS rebuild boot and just reboot your machine, and then you are good to go. What we also have been using in our videos was the -- target host, and this would just give a host name of the machine I have in my SSH configuration, and then the configuration will be built on my machine and sent over to the target machine. And what we also had was the remove sudo command, because rebuilding the configuration and sending it over to the target host is not a problem. But in order to switch the configuration on the target system, you need to add the use remove sudo part here, and then it will prompt you for your password, and then the new system will be built, sent over to the target machine, and then the system will switch to the new state. And what you can also do is you can specify a build host. So, for example, I could kind of have a triangle situation here. So I could have my actual machine I am doing my configuration on, and I could have my target host. And let's say I got a very powerful computer in my network, which doesn't have anything to do right now, then I could just specify a build host and actually do the building part on the other machine and then send it over to the target host. So this gives a lot of flexibility when building systems. Another very important command is NixOS rebuild switch and then -- rollback. And this will actually do as the name suggests. This will just roll back to the previous system state. And of course, that's very useful when you do a rebuild switch and you find out, I don't know, some packages are not working really or something is wrong with the system. Another command I like a lot is NixOS rebuild and then build VM. And this basically allows me to create a virtual machine out of any system configuration I have specified in my Nix Flake. So when I execute this, this will start evaluating, and this will build a virtual machine for me. Now the NixOS rebuild command has built a virtual machine, and you can see here the virtual machine can be started, and then it's referring to a path in my Nix store. So when I just execute that, it will start my virtual machine here. And that's obviously very useful for trying things out. And there's also a lot more to it, because you can also make more with the build VM command, and maybe I will address that also in a later video. But just for now, I wanted to show you that this is possible. Another thing I would like to talk about is the use of multiple Nix packages in my demo Flake here. So when we have a look here, we have two Nix packages in our inputs. We have Nix packages unstable, and then we have Nix packages stable from May 2024. And the way the Flake is set up right now is Nix packages unstable is the default. And of course, there is a possibility to use packages from the stable branch here. And this is actually defined in the overlays section. So we have the overlays folder and default.nix. And you can see here in the modifications section, we define an overlay for stable Nix packages. Let's say we want to put a stable package to the user space. So we would go to home, our user folder, and then into home.nix. And here we have home packages. And just for brevity, I will just add a with statement here to have it a little bit easier. And then I could just, for example, put in Git. And let's say I wanted to have neovim from the stable branch. Then I would just refer to stable.neovim in this case. And when I save it, and let's say I will just rebuild my VM, this will also evaluate. And actually what this will do is it will take Git in this case from unstable, and neovim will come from stable. So this will be a much older version that is on than is on NixOS unstable at the moment. And that's the way really you can work with the different versions of Nix packages. And that's also how and why it is defined like this in the overlays here. Multiple people have been asking me why I don't use global packages for Home Manager in my Flake example here. And let me quickly show you what is meant with this question so we are all on the same page here. So right now in our home folder under common default.nix, we have our own dedicated Nix packages configuration for the Home Manager part. And there is also another and more easy way to do this, really. Instead of defining Nix packages explicitly for our Home Manager part here, we can just make Home Manager use global packages. In order to show you this, we need to be at least in the code for video number 2. So when I enter git checkout video 2, we switch to video 2. And here we have under hosts common and then default.nix. We have the shared home manager configuration for the users here. Here we already have, for example, use user packages, and we can add use global packages equals true. This will eliminate the need to configure Nix packages for home manager. So this will actually make Home Manager use global packages. So that will mean we have one single source of truth when it comes to packages. So when I try to rebuild my virtual machine, you can see I get a warning here. So on my user profile, Nix packages options are disabled when Home Manager use global packages is enabled. And what this basically means, we can only have one or the other. If in your own version of this Nix Flake, you want to use global packages, you could just go to home common default.nix. Here we have our Nix packages part. So when we take this out here and save our file and try rebuilding again, this will work and evaluate, and that's a way to switch from the configuration I have made to using global packages on Home Manager. Actually, both approaches have their advantages and disadvantages. Obviously, when you use global packages, you will have a simpler configuration across all users and systems, really. And for me, the reason why I chose against it was I wanted to have a maximum amount of flexibility, really. So for example, on my development machines, I usually want to have the latest packages from NixOS Unstable. And on my servers, I want to have stable packages most of the time for stability. And sometimes you just want to mix and match. The last thing I want to talk about in this video is some sources when it comes to learning Nix. The first one I would like to bring to your attention is 0 to Nix. And 0 to Nix is a great guide when it comes to flakes and when it comes to development environments, really. And when we have a look at the quick start here, you can see there are different sections that aim to get you started with Nix. And the explanations on 0 to Nix are very, very good. So I can just encourage you to have a look at it. And especially when it comes to flakes, there is the Flakes book you can read online, and this really covers a lot of topics, and it will also cover some of the more advanced topics. This book is really great to read, and there are a lot of good examples. There are a lot of best practices in here, and you can get very far just from this book with Nix Flakes. Then we have nix.dev and especially Nix language basics, and this was recommended by one of you in the comments, really. And this is also a great resource when you want to learn Nix. And the last one is, of course, the NixOS wiki. Actually, on the NixOS wiki, there are some parts that are pretty old, but there are also very good examples when it comes to configuration. For example, what's also very well documented here is how to set up GPUs on a laptop and so on and so forth. So that's also a very great resource to use. So I hope this video gives you a little bit more guidance on some of the basic topics when it comes to working with Flakes, Git, and Nix. That's it from me today. I will see you in the next video. Have a good time. Bye bye.